Illusionists, masters of magic, deception, and of course, dragons? Illusionists have traditionally become the scourge of any meta they encounter. They are masters at building boards with auras, dragons, or more recently, angels. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and bitches, audience members who will end up in stitches, today I and Sloop Doop will count down the top 10 best talented illusionist cards. Sloop's gonna count down the top 5 best light illusionist cards, and I will count down the top 5 best draconic illusionist cards. As always, we will be focusing on the main Flesh and Blood formats of Blitz and Classic Constructed. And this list is just our opinion, so if you disagree, you are obviously just wrong. Now, sit back, relax, and let the magic take hold.
As of the making of this video, both iterations of Prism have been the only light illusionists in the game, and the Herald attack actions are the backbone of her strategy. All of them are powerful attack with on hits to boot, but have the downside of having Phantasm. And cards with Phantasm can be immediately destroyed when blocked with Poppers, which are non-illusionist attack actions with 6 or more power. Running into a deck with lots of Poppers can make things a little difficult for Prism, but that's where Merciful Retribution comes in. This 4-cost aura makes it so that when one of your attack actions or auras is destroyed, the Merciful deals an arcane to the opponent. And if the card was a non-token light card, it goes into the soul. For OG Prism, this was fantastic when paired with the full Aura Luminaris build, as it could close out games on its own and paired perfectly with Ode to Wrath. And for new Prism, this is a fantastic way for her to guarantee that her heralds go to soul even when popped, and they trigger her ability. No matter the strategy, Merciful Retribution plays an integral role in any Prism deck, earning itself the number 5 slot.
Before I get into these cards, let me explain Chromai's strategy real quick. Her ability lets her make Ash when you pitch a red card. That Ash can be used to invoke dragons, but the Ash gives them the keyword of Phantasm. Her weapon, Storm of Sandakai, lets her attack with her dragons for the cost of fucking nothing, and her ability gives them go again if you've played a red pitch card this turn. Aether Ashwings are the most basic of Chromai's dragons, being a 1-attack, 1-life dragon with the only effect of Arcane Barrier 1. While Ashwings on their own aren't inherently strong, they are certainly annoying, and that's where our number 5 spot comes in. Rake the Embers is a 1-cost Draconic Illusionist non-attack action that says, create an Ash and transform 3 Ash into Aether Ashwing. It also transforms 2 in yellow and 1 in blue. So with 1 Ash on the board and pitching a red card, you make 3 Ashwings, which for most decks is an absolute pain to deal with. It starts your strategy off building a board and gives your opponent 3 annoying dragons to deal with. All of that off of just 1 card, meaning they either need 3 poppers or 3 separate attacks to clear all these dragons. As for those who don't know, these dragons are their standalone allies, and the only way to clear them is to actually attack into them or destroy them with Phantasm. This card is even worse late game, as it can cost 3 whole cards to block all of them, which, let's be honest, nobody wants to do. While Ashwings aren't difficult to deal with, they are annoying. If you ignore them for too long, your opponent can just pack on value for them, as again, just 1 red card gives them all go again.
When a Herald hits and goes into Soul, the new Prism is allowed to search out a Figment, and the best one to grab is easily the Figment of Airition. This card gets you a Ponder token on enter, which can be quite useful in a Herald heavy build, as it often gives you an attack to Arsenal, but the real power in this card lies on its other side. Flipping this card over with Prism's ability summons Soraya, Archangel of Airition, and this card is an absolute beast. Like all angels, this card costs 2 resources to attack for 4, and it has ward 4, but the real power lies in its on-attack ability. If you banish a card from Soul on attack, this lets you draw 2 cards, and with Lag as your weapon, you've got Go Again on the Angel, so you can actually use those cards that you drew. This Angel is by far and away the best in the group, and gives the Prism player insane value the longer it sticks on the field. Pairing it with a Tome of Divinity enables insane combo turns, which can completely shift the tide of a game, and when it's finally time for it to leave the field, it either eats a direct attack or takes 4 damage that was meant for you. This card is incredibly useful when you can cheat it from the deck, you just hope that you don't actually draw it.
If Rosetta Thorn has taught us anything, split arcane and physical damage is the most annoying thing to deal with. Burn the Maha is a red Draconic Illusionist aura with Go Again, and it says, once per turn, when you attack with a dragon, deal 1 arcane damage to your opponent. But to keep this on the field, you need to put raise counters on the card, and for every raise counter, you need to banish a red card from your graveyard. But considering that you're playing Chromai, this card's going to be sticking around for a while. This card is absolutely fantastic late game. It basically turns your first dragon attack into a pseudo Rosetta Thorn. If this is near the end game and your opponent has low life, they essentially need to use 2 cards minimum to take no damage from a dragon attack. And given that Chromai doesn't actually do that much arcane damage in the span of the game, most people don't want to use an equipment slot for Null Rune against an Illusionist if they don't need to, so late game this is basically guaranteed damage. And if it's not late game, this is a great way to slowly chip more damage over time, as usually giving up a whole card to block one arcane damage is not really worth it. Depending on how many turns this can stay on the field for, this card can do a pretty substantial amount of damage. On the low end, maybe between 2 and 3, and on the high end, maybe between 6 and 7. Oh, and if you have more than one of these, they stack. Not to mention, this isn't even an aura card like Spectra where you can attack into it to get rid of it early. Nope, your only hope is to sit there and wait until they run out of red cards. Good luck with that. Doing split arcane and physical damage is just insanely useful for chipping damage on your opponent, and this card is even better at closing the late game.
If Merciful Retribution played an integral role in Prism, then Genesis is the entire engine. This aura is undoubtedly the most powerful of the 4-cost yellows and does everything this deck wants. At the beginning of your turn, it lets you put a card in Soul, and if it's an Illusionist card, you get a Spectral Shield, and if it's a light card, you draw a card. Put a light Illusionist card in, and you get both abilities. While this doesn't trigger the new Prism's ability, it does fuel the Soul to use cards like the aforementioned Archangel of Erudition, lets you filter your hand, makes shields to help protect you, and turns on the effects of cards like Vestige of Soul. In fact, Genesis is such a good card that you'll probably only get one activation with it, since it's almost always a kill on sight card for the opponent. And while that might sound bad at first, considering it has Spectra, unless the opponent rolled a 4 or higher on Scabskin Leathers, they're ending their turn by attacking this. In OG Prism, this was used to swarm the board with auras, and in New Prism, it's used to help set up repeated angel uses. This makes Genesis an absolute all-star light Illusionist card.
Alright gentlemen, we need more dragons. I need ideas, people. Snatch. But with Go Again. John, are you okay? Invoy Oria costs 1, attacks for 4, has 2 life, and if it hits, you take an item your opponent controls. But if you can't, you draw a card. Oh yeah, and you know how the dragons get Go Again if you've played a red card? The invoke cards count. So for most decks, this card is just Snatch. Presenting a breakpoint with Go Again and threatening to draw a card is beyond annoying. To cover this, you need 2 cards, a defense reaction, a card in armor, or a popper. Or, alternatively, you can steal an item your opponent may need. Maybe a mech item they had to set up, or a gold you can pitch into to make more ash. Kyloria is so powerful as a dragon that it demands a response. The longer it stays on the field, the more value you get from it.
If there's one card that everyone knows and hates Prism for, it's the Arclite Sentinel, also known as ALS. For a whopping 6 cost, this big boy hits the field and forces the opponent to attack it. And remember what I just said about the Spectra ability with Genesis? If an opponent doesn't have a way to generate an extra action point before attacking, they are forced to waste their entire turn dealing with this card. Unlike Genesis, they don't get a choice between going at your face or the aura. They have to attack the Arclite Sentinel. And the best part about this, or worse depending on which side of the table you're on, is that ALS is an instant. Playing against an Azalea who just played 3 pumps for her attack, drop an ALS and watch the light die from their eyes. 5 plays an Art of War on a 5-card hand, shut them down before they even think about blowing their load. While ALS costs a heck of a lot of resources, the ability to shut down an opponent's turn right when they're about to make a huge swing is incredibly powerful. Almost as powerful as the hatred your opponent will feel towards you after playing it.
Phantasm's annoying, right? Once your dragon goes poof, your turn is basically over, right? Wrong. Introducing Chromai. To invoke this dragon, it costs nothing, but when you have him as an ally, he attacks for 3, has 2 life, and when he attacks or leaves the arena, you gain an action point. This means that if he gets popped, your turn keeps going, so your opponent better hope they have more than 1 popper. Or, let's say you block with your full hand. Chromai lets you attack with it and another dragon for literally nothing. Chromai is unique in that it raises the floor of your deck, giving even your worst turns some power. And if you're facing a deck with little to no poppers like Ranger, Chromai makes it even harder to face this very already powerful deck. Oh, but that's just the start. If you've played a red card, the action points stack, meaning that you can play a red card, attack with Chromai, and then play a card like Snatch or Dust Up that doesn't have Go Again, and keep your turn going with the added benefits these cards give you. Not to mention, you can also use that extra action point to deal with another certain keyword that everyone's complaining about again. Keeping the gas on your bad turns and flooring it on your already powerful turns, Chromai just crushes it from all angles.
Number 1 on my list might be a little biased as it's a personal favorite card of mine, but there's no doubt that it is an amazing card. Herald of Airition is the OG Light Illusionist power card, being a 2-cost 5 attack with Dominate, and if it hits, it goes into Soul and draws you 2 cards. This card was actually insane in OG Prism, who gave all of her Illusionist attacks and auras go again with the Luminaris, but even new Prism with lag loves this card. 5 Dominate makes it blockable with armor, but as the game goes on, players will have to use that armor to stop other Herald effects, leaving them open in the mid to late game. Landing one of these and drawing 2 cards is super powerful on its own, as it lets you send another attack or play out an aura, but being able to chain this with an Archangel of Erudition and or a Tome of Divinity is just stupid. This card is something opponents have to be aware of when facing Prism, and forces players to either block ineffectively against the rest of her attacks to save their armor, or they face the Wrath of Erudition with their defenses down. And this is what puts Herald of Erudition at the top of my list. This card is genuinely nuts when it actually hits, but the fact that it's also a card that forces your opponent to play differently and worry about is a huge upside. At absolute worst, this card can attack early and eat some armor, or just block 3, which is something no other Light Illusionist card on this list does. Of course, this card can be popped, but every Herald has that downside, and unless you're facing something like Guardian or Brute, most decks don't have an endless amount, and probably won't have one for this in the late game.
The legendary dragons are stupid strong. I mean, makes sense, you can only have one of each of them. And they are really expensive. But with Tome of Imperial Flame and Flamescale Furnace, it isn't hard to get the resources needed to crank out one of these. Dracoma Optimi can present a ton of arcane damage. Tumulti can destroy equipment. And while yes, those are absolutely powerful, the strongest is Invoke Dominia. It costs 4, but when you invoke it, you can attack for 4 and reveal the top card of your deck. And if it's a red card, which, let's be honest, it probably is, you can look at your opponent's hand and banish a card from it. So if your opponent is unlucky to have 1 pauper, yeah, that's gone. Not only that, you get near full knowledge of your opponent's next turn. All of their attacks, their reactions, their everything. Meaning that you can play around any extra paupers they may have, forcing them to actually use up attacks to clear up your dragons. Being able to look at and manipulate your opponent's hand is just busted, no matter the deck you're playing against. Plus, this card is the cheapest legendary to bring out, so you can potentially bring out another dragon to make your turn even bigger. So what do you guys think? Do you agree? Are you wrong? Let me know down below. And big thanks to SloopDupe for cameoing in this video. After you subscribe to me, you should go subscribe to him. He's got some very high quality fab content.